Have you ever wondered whether you're truly ambitious or whether anxiety is simply wearing the mask of ambition? Many women in leadership pride themselves on being dependable, organized, and driven. They're the first to volunteer, the last to leave, and the person everyone knows they can count on. They answer emails late into the evening, over prepare for presentations, and constantly think 3 steps ahead. From the outside, this looks like success, but on the inside, it may feel very different. Instead of feeling energized by your work, you may feel like you're constantly trying to prevent something bad from happening. Instead of enjoying your accomplishments, you immediately move on to the next task, worried that you'll lose momentum or disappoint someone. Today, we're talking about the difference between high functioning anxiety and true ambition. The distinction matters because they may look almost identical on the outside, but they are driven by completely different forces on the inside. Healthy ambition is driven by purpose. High functioning anxiety is driven by fear. Although high functioning anxiety isn't an official medical diagnosis, psychologists often use the term to describe people who appear highly successful while experiencing persistent internal worry. Research tells us that anxiety disorders affect nearly 1 in 5 adults each year, and women experience anxiety disorders almost twice as often as men. There are biological reasons for this, but there are also powerful social factors. From a young age, many girls are praised for being helpful, responsible, accommodating, and getting everything just right. As adults, these messages can evolve into perfectionism and people pleasing. We begin to believe that our value comes from how much we accomplish rather than who we are. The workplace often reinforces this belief. Women are expected to be confident but not intimidating, assertive but still warm, decisive but collaborative, strong but likable. Researchers call this the double bind. Studies from leanin.org and McKinsey's Women in the Workplace report have found that women leaders often take on more mentoring, emotional support, and organizational responsibilities than their male colleagues. These contributions are incredibly valuable, yet they frequently go unnoticed. The result? More responsibility, less recovery, more stress. One of the biggest differences between anxiety and healthy ambition happens inside the brain. When anxiety takes over, your amygdala, which is your brain's threat detector, becomes highly active. The amygdala evolved to protect us from danger. Unfortunately, it doesn't always distinguish between a real physical threat and a critical email from your boss. To your nervous system, an unanswered email, an important presentation, or a difficult conversation may all feel like potential danger. When that happens, your body releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones are incredibly helpful during short periods of stress, but when they're elevated day after day, they begin affecting your thinking. Research shows that chronic stress reduces communication with the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for strategic thinking, emotional regulation, creativity, and decision making. This helps explain why exhausted leaders often work harder but accomplish less. Their brains are operating in survival mode instead of growth mode. Now let's compare that with true ambition. Healthy ambition comes from curiosity. It comes from wanting to learn, to contribute, to solve meaningful problems. Psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, who developed self-determination theory, found that people who are motivated by internal purpose rather than external approval experience greater creativity, resilience, and long-term satisfaction. Think about the difference between these two thoughts. The first says, I have to do this perfectly so no one thinks I'm incompetent. The second says, I'm excited to solve this problem because it aligns with my goals. The behavior might look similar, but emotionally, they're worlds apart. One question I encourage every leader to ask is this: if no one praised me, if no one noticed, would I still want to do this work? That question separates external validation from genuine purpose. Let's look at a few real life examples. Imagine you're preparing for a presentation. If anxiety is driving you, you might spend 3 weeks revising every slide, worrying about every possible question, and rehearsing until you're completely exhausted. If healthy ambition is driving you, you'll prepare thoroughly, practice, make improvements, and then trust yourself enough to walk into the room. The difference isn't preparation. The difference is whether preparation comes from confidence or fear. Here's another example. Your manager asks if you can lead another committee. If anxiety is driving you, your first instinct may be to say yes immediately because you're afraid saying no will make you appear uncommitted. Instead, try responding with, thank you for thinking of me. I'd like to review my current priorities before I commit so I can give this project the attention it deserves. That's not a lack of ambition. That's leadership. Or perhaps a colleague asks you to take on additional work. Instead of automatically saying yes, try saying, I'd be happy to help. Let's look at my current workload together and determine what's most important. Healthy boundaries actually make us stronger leaders. One of the biggest myths in leadership is that rest makes us less productive. The opposite is true. Neuroscience tells us that during periods of rest, the brain's default mode network becomes active. This network plays a critical role in creativity, insight, learning, and problem solving. Have you ever noticed that your best ideas come while you're walking, taking a shower, or driving? That's your brain continuing to work even though you've stepped away. Recovery isn't wasted time, it's part of peak performance. So, how can you begin shifting from anxiety driven achievement to healthy ambition? First, define success on your own terms. Ask yourself, what does success look like if no one else is watching? Second, replace perfection with progress. Instead of asking, is this perfect? Ask, does this move the work forward? Third, celebrate the process instead of only celebrating outcomes. Notice when you delegate, when you have a difficult conversation, when you establish a healthy boundary. These are leadership wins too. Finally, practice speaking to yourself the way you'd speak to someone you mentor. Instead of saying, I failed, try saying, I'm learning. Research by psychologist Kristen Neff shows that self compassion doesn't reduce motivation. It actually increases resilience. As we finish today, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. Your career should not require you to sacrifice your peace. True ambition doesn't ask you to live in constant survival mode. It doesn't require exhaustion to prove your worth. The most effective leaders aren't driven by fear, they're guided by purpose. They're willing to grow, they're willing to recover, they're willing to learn from mistakes. And perhaps most importantly, they understand that their value isn't determined by how much they produce. So this week, ask yourself one simple question. Am I running toward a meaningful purpose? Or am I simply running away from fear? Your answer may change not only the way you lead, but also the way you live. Thank you so much for listening. If you found today's episode helpful, I'd love for you to subscribe, share it with another woman in leadership, and visit powerofpeacefulness.com, where you'll find more evidence-based resources to help you lead with confidence, clarity, and calm. Read my full article at powerofpeacefulness.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, and grab my free leadership workbook, 5 Steps to Communicate with Calm, Clarity, and Confidence at powerofpeacefulness.com. Until next time, take a deep breath. Embrace the present moment and keep walking your path to peace.